Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Frontline Gaming Community's Champions Draft Series Season 5 recap for the Champion League. There's a whole lot more to talk about, and it's gonna be a fun one. We've got general managers, historical versus current rank, and of course, brand new franchises. So, the Spartans replaced the Drakes this season as a franchise. And of course, we now have a franchise system. Go figure. General managers came in to be able to command and demand perfection as well as good work ethic amongst all our captains and all our players that drafted through our season. Historical versus current rank. We, for previous seasons for the FLG, utilized historical rank to determine if you were going to be in the Champion League, the Vanguard League, or the Challenger League. For the Champion League, if you were Grand Champion any previous season, you're going to be part of the Champion League. For this season, we decided to use current rank. So there were some people who were previously GC, but they are now C2, C3, and they could flex between either being Vanguard or Champion. This narrowed the gap both in skill level as well as competition that people wanted to be a part of, and of course, made it for a little bit of drama and fun. But in the Champion League, it's all high-tier competition, so that didn't really matter. This season, when it came to the draft order, we had two different franchises that decided to use their franchise token. The Ninjas went with the tried and true PC dog. This Ninjas group was already a great competitor and ended up coming up third, just away from the grand finals in Season 4. They wanted to try and repeat with the exact same roster of Dino, PC Dog, as well as Cryptide, and see if they could do it all over again. And of course, we had the Knights able to utilize Henry's pickup of Andy since he played with them on the mob in Season 4 as well, which ended up being a huge pick. I mean, Andy, big competitor. He's always going to be big time when it comes to any of our FLG seasons. That made the first overall pick from the Avalanche to become Peyton, who showed up well into the combines and proved to be quite the force for any squad that was going to pick him up. Moving into Week 0, we had the power rankings depict the Ninjas to be the #1 overall team to beat. And of course, post Week 0, it was the exact same thing, being able to sweep through every single one of their matches. And of course, these matches in Week 0 didn't count towards overall record and more were of a organized scrim type of affair. But even so, didn't drop a single game as they were able to move through every single squad with what just can be understood to be really good practice. Moving into week #1, two big teams to look at were the Mob and the Ninjas, both going 2-0, both going 6-0 in games, streaking their way through the competition. The free agency became active for the Champion League post-week 1, as the captain for the Bandits ended up dropping out of the competition, which allowed them to pick up Othos and establish Pres J, or President J, or Mr. President for those of you that know him in the community, as their new captain. And then, of course, big trades between the Mob and the Tsunami, as Kona went to the Tsunami and Ventrance went to the Mob. The Ninjas continue their undefeated streak as they're able to face off in their first meeting with the Nova, just barely defeating them in game #5 to stay undefeated at 3-0, and the Nova dropping to 2-2 at the time. The Casuals continue to be winless, which continues to be a pattern for the majority, if not the entirety, of the season, down to 0-3. And the free agency was just as active as the FLG saw its first ever three-way triangle trade between the Bandits, the Tsunami, as well as the Knights. It was Lux, it was Jack, it was Jay Hensley, and it was a mess. But all players ended up being on the franchises that wanted them, and it was a very interesting affair as majority of these trades ended up being a big deal moving into the second half of the season. An even bigger deal as the Mob had 3 out of its 4 players banned out of the competition and the community. The Mob had to be rebuilt completely from the bottom up. Danpai became the new captain, as well as Coco Peanut and ASAP, who were added to the roster to try and salvage what could be still a good season, as that franchise was 3-0 at the time. Even after all the drama, moving into week #3, both the Mob and the Ninjas were able to stay undefeated, both working to 4-0 in their respective divisions in the Champion League. The Casuals were crushed and moving down to 0-5 and statistically eliminated from the playoffs in week 3, a pattern that we consistently see out of this franchise season after season. In the battle for Utopia Coliseum in front of the Emperor, we got to see the Knights versus the Spartans. The Spartans utilizing a sneaky pickup as a outside league free agent of Mikey was able to come in to have a clash of the Titans. It was once more Andy versus Mikey on the field. However, since Mikey was not a purely registered free agent before the season began, nor had he been able to utilize a midseason pickup from the Spartans, they had to go in with a one-game loss. Ended up in a 3-1 win for the Knights, but it sure was fun seeing Andy versus Mikey on the field again, a repeat of the Season 2 Grand Finals. In the free agency for week number 3, the Bandits ended up having to drop Othos, and they picked up Skyra as a last-second pick, whereas the Mob had Coco Penis depart from their roster, and in the last part of the season ended up having to utilize Azuro. Week number 4 still had plenty of action, as we had one spot left for the postseason. The Spartans and the Thunderbirds facing off in a clash between teams that just don't like each other. Made it all the way to game number 5, and the Thunderbirds were able to win their way in, and Banter, for the first time in his history of playing with the FLG, missed a postseason. The Ninjas were without PC Dog, which is huge when you consider the concept of Dino, Cryptide, and PC Dog having played together for the entirety of nearly 2 seasons in a row. They utilized their sub of Bread Boy, but it just wasn't enough. As PC Dog came back in late, they could not overcome a Game 5 loss to the Tsunami, yet still retained their number 1 seed placement. We're now in day 1 of the postseason playoffs. Both the Avalanche and the Bandits fell to the Eliminator, which allowed the Tsunami and the Thunderbirds to move on. The Tsunami were looking to match the exact same pace as their Vanguard brethren, but ended up falling just short, as both the Ninjas and the Nova were set on a collision course to have a regular season rematch in the playoffs in the upper final bracket. Day 2 of the postseason for the Champion League came around, and it was just as historical as the Vanguard League the previous night. The Nova faced off against the Ninjas in the Grand Finals and were able to exact their revenge in game number 7, punching the first ticket to the Grand Finals for the Champion League, as the Ninjas went down to the lower finals to wait on who would be their next opponent and try to not make 3rd place again for Cryptide. However, with Andy leading the Knights, they only dropped 3 games in total between their 3 matches in the lower quarters, semis, and finals, giving Cryptide his 2nd consecutive 3rd place finish in the upper bracket and allowing the Knights to move on to the Grand Finals against the Nova. Copying the same run that the Casuals saw in their lower bracket run in the Vanguard League playoffs, the Knights had to come back from a 3-1 deficit in their first Grand Final bracket to overtake the Nova and force a bracket reset. They then moved on and were down 3-0 with 4 match points for the Nova, who were unable to come away with a Grand Final win. The Knights ended up reverse sweeping in a 28-game sprint through the lower side of the bracket to give the Knights franchise its first ever championship in the Champion League and overall in the entirety of FLG's seasons. Champion Draft Series Season 5 recap has been fun. It's been great. We hope to see another great season of the Draft Series coming to the Frontline Gaming community. I'm Hailmonkeyman, and hope to see you guys again next time.